It all started like any other lively afternoon on the Kelly Clarkson Show. The studio lit up in warmth and enthusiasm as the Grammy-winning host strolled to center stage with her usual sunny smile. The audience, already electrified with applause, roared louder when she introduced her guest, the legendary Harrison Ford, clad in a simple gray shirt and his signature stoic expression. Ford walked out with a half smile, his casual gait betraying decades of Hollywood mystique. Kelly met him with a hug and an easy laugh, instantly launching into nostalgic chatter about his iconic roles. The mood was light, the jokes flew freely. Indiana Jones and his aversion to snakes, behind-the-scenes moments from Star Wars, and even a humorous anecdote involving Ford accidentally crash-landing a plane on a golf course. The chemistry seemed effortless, the laughter genuine, and for the first few minutes, the segment seemed destined to be another charming clip for daytime reruns. But just beneath the surface, there was an unmistakable wary glance, Kelly's subtle shift in posture, the tension that only seasoned eyes could detect brewing slowly in real time. As the banter continued, Kelly began steering the conversation ever so slightly off. She segued from career nostalgia to deeper, more personal reflections. She asked about legacy not just as an actor, but as a father, a husband, a citizen in turbulent times. Ford, visibly less comfortable, responded with brief, measured answers. The crowd noticed the shift. Kelly, ever the professional, pressed gently but persistently. There's been a lot of talk about actors using their platforms. She began carefully. About whether legends like yourself have a responsibility to speak out more, especially in political or social matters. You've stayed pretty quiet lately, even when others in Hollywood have taken strong stands. Any reason why? The air thickened. Ford's eyes narrowed just slightly. I don't think people come to hear me talk politics, he said flatly, sipping his water. Kelly smiled, nodding diplomatically, but she didn't let go. But don't you think silence is also a statement, Harrison? Especially now. The room fell quiet. It was a turning point. A barely perceptible beat where charm began to fade. Into confrontation, Ford leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, his tone cooling further. I'm an actor, Kelly. I'm not running for office. There was no smile now. His words were crisp, deliberate. The applause light above the audience didn't flicker on, as it usually did, and Clarkson seemed to pause, unsure whether to retreat or dig deeper. Her eyes flicked briefly to the producer off stage, then back to Ford. But you've played heroes for decades, she said more intently now. People listen when you speak. Don't you think your silence lately, especially during certain national tragedies, sends a message? Ford's brows furrowed. You're twisting this, he replied, his voice louder. I'm not obligated to broadcast my every opinion just because I've been in a few movies people like. There was an audible shift in the audience, half stunned, half impressed. Kelly's tone, still calm, grew firmer. It's not about obligation, it's about influence. A voice like yours could really matter. Ford stood his ground, figuratively and literally, his posture straightening, his eyes now sharp. Influence, he repeated, voice edged with disbelief. You want me to hop on Instagram and tweet out platitudes like everyone else? His sarcasm cut through the air like a blade. That's not who I am. Never has been. Kelly, trying to maintain composure, glanced again at the producers, who were now visibly shifting behind the cameras. She laughed softly, trying to diffuse the moment. I think people just want to know where their heroes stand. It's about connection, but the damage was done. Ford looked down, shook his head slowly, then looked back at her with something between contempt and restraint. Maybe the problem is that people keep confusing characters with real people. I don't owe anyone a damn stance to validate their feelings. His voice didn't rise, but the weight of it was thunderous. You could hear a pin drop. Clarkson adjusted in her seat. It's not about validation, she said quietly. It's about accountability. Especially when someone's silence feels like complicity. That word complicity hung in the air like smoke. Ford froze for a moment, then he leaned forward, his tone calm but laced with steel. You want a soundbite? Fine. Here's one. I think it's dangerous when entertainers are expected to carry the moral compass for society. I make movies. I don't write policy. You want accountability? Start with your politicians. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. A few murmurs began to rise. Clarkson, feeling the crowd's tension and her own discomfort growing, tried to pivot. Okay, maybe let's lighten things up, but Ford wasn't having it. No, he interrupted, standing now. You brought this up. You wanted real? That's real. You don't get to invite me on, poke the bear, and act surprised when it growls. There was a loud rustle as the crew scrambled to adapt to the new pacing. A producer rushed forward off camera, whispering rapidly into an assistant's headset. Kelly rose to her feet, facing Ford now, who stood center stage like a weathered oak, refusing to bend. This isn't about poking anyone, she said calmly but with resolve. It's about dialogue. It's about using this platform to do more than just sell nostalgia. Ford gave a dry, almost mocking laugh. Maybe that's all your audience came for. Kelly, nostalgia, maybe it's not me who's out of touch. The crowd gasped, a few gasps, a couple of nervous chuckles. Clarkson's jaw clenched for the briefest moment. The tension was no longer cinematic, it was real, raw, and absolutely magnetic. With the cameras still rolling, Ford turned to the audience, nodded once in farewell, and without a glance back, began to walk off stage. Clarkson stood frozen, her face unreadable. The house band faltered, unsure whether to cue music. Producers waved frantically behind the scenes. One shouted to cut to commercial. But the cameras didn't blink. The show didn't fade. Ford's footsteps echoed as he vanished off stage, leaving a silence more powerful than any monologue. Kelly turned back to the audience, her voice steady but low. Well, that was not how we rehearsed it. The crowd offered a soft, confused laugh. She forced a smile, trying to regroup. Let's take a quick break. But even after the segment ended, the moment wasn't over. Social media exploded within minutes. Clips of the clash were already trending, hashtags like hashtag Ford vs. Clarkson, hashtag talkshow meltdown, and hashtag silence is not neutral filled timelines. News outlets pounced on IT pundits arguing whether Ford was right to walk off or whether Clarkson was brave to push the issue. Editorials debated the role of celebrity voices in politics. Fans were divided. Some called it a powerful moment of truth, others, ACCUSE, the show of ambushing a guest for views. But one thing was clear, this wasn't going to be forgotten. That moment, captured on daytime television, had become a cultural flashpoint. And yet, despite all the speculation, no official statement came from either side. In the hours that followed, Ford's rep stayed silent. Clarkson's team only issued a vague note about creative differences and a passionate exchange of perspectives. The network replayed a softened, edited version of the episode the next day, removing the most volatile moments. But the internet had already immortalized it. It lived on in reaction videos, think pieces, and late-night satire. The moment had become myth, and whether or not they ever reunited, whether apologies were exchanged behind closed doors or egos forever bruised, none of that mattered now, because for millions watching at home, the clash had already been etched in talk show history, a collision of icon and platform, silence and confrontation, past and present with no resolution in sight, just the echoes of a storm that began with a smile and ended with a walk-off.